Hello, welcome back. I'm Nicole, a cottage witch. This is the third installment of my Read Around the World challenge thing. I think there will be 4 episodes altogether, if you can call them episodes, because basically it was just one long video that I recorded, and then my phone doesn't have enough storage space, so episodes. And anyway, here we go. Jamaica. Oh, I read Marlon James's book, A Brief History of 7 Killings. Where is Jamaica here? There it is. And I appreciate what Marlon James does as a writer. I've read his first fantasy novel as well. But it's just not for me. Like, I get that it's kind of epic in scope and apparently brilliant. But yeah, just not my cup of tea. Personally, I would like to read. I've read a bit about Jamaica by non-Jamaican authors, but I do still need to find a non-fiction book somewhere about Jamaica. And then Japan, Silence. There was a movie made of that, I think, but I didn't watch it. It was about Franciscans or something. I don't know, some sort of Christian monks or somebody went to Japan as missionaries, and there was some conflict, as will happen, between Christianity and local beliefs. Most versions of Christianity not accepting local beliefs as legitimate, and so there were ensuing power struggles, and people were killed. And sometimes it was the Christians who were killed. And yeah, it was really interesting. I should read more from Japan. Jordan. Actually, are these little islands part of Japan? My East Asian geography is not what it could be. I think that's all part of Japan, though. There are a lot of islands. Jordan. The Willow Trees Don't Weep, Faria Fakir. That was really good. I enjoyed that one. I also read, and I didn't count this as my nonfiction book because she was born American, but I read Queen Rania's book. She wrote a memoir when she married the Jordanian king, and obviously became Jordanian as the queen there. And that was pretty interesting. So yeah, that's Jordan. And then Kazakhstan, haven't read yet. Kenya. Okay, I don't know how to say Thiongo's first name. Ngugi wa Thiong'o, A Grain of Wheat. That was a good book. He's one of those early days of post-colonial, end of colonialism sort of writers who wrote about the Kenyan experience of colonialism and how things went after that. I have several other books of his to read. That was very good. And then Wangari Maathai, Unbowed. That's a memoir. If you've never read anything by Wangari Maathai, she was a Nobel Peace Prize winner from Kenya, and she did a lot of work in politics, but also agriculture and sustainability, because Kenya is one of those places where, like in Canada, it's easy in most places, especially if you're not Indigenous or don't live up north, to be pretty insulated against the effects of climate change. Like, there are effects we can see now, from everything from gardening zones to wildfire season changing, but we're relatively insulated from that in the cities. Kenya is one of those places where pretty early on the effects of climate change and deforestation were felt. And so one of Wangari Maathai's thing was a massive reforestation campaign that worked brilliantly well, because they had a problem with, when the forest was gone, the rainwater wasn't staying in the soil and becoming part of the groundwater, and then it would evaporate. It would run into the river and then evaporate elsewhere and then come down in unusual places. So the farms weren't getting water in the traditional places, and the water in what used to be forested land was just running away. So it was a bit, and when you're a subsistence farmer, becomes a national crisis. And so she did some incredible work in that department. Kuwait, the bamboo stalk. I think that's the only book. No, I sort of already uncovered Kuwait. Oops. I think that's the only book from a Kuwaiti author in English, actually. Kyrgyzstan. Chingiz Aytmatov. It is where's Kyrgyzstan? There it is. It's sometimes quite hard to find books from Central Asia in English, because they're just not, like, it's probably easier to find them in Russian or even in Farsi maybe, but not so much in English. So I think that's the only one that's available from Kyrgyzstan that I could find. I mean, this is also books that I have access to in Canada, so maybe in Europe or elsewhere it's different. I don't know. There we go. All right, Lebanon, Hanan al-Sheikh. I've got to reread her or read some of her other books or something. Lebanon's one of these countries I already uncovered. But she's one of these authors that I didn't understand at first because the literature of Arab women was so different than what I was used to reading. So it took me a while and reading a lot of books from the Middle East to sort of get a handle on it. But I really appreciate it, and she's very good. Liberia, Wayatu Moore, She Would Be King. Oh, I'm reading. I just started the audiobook as well for This Child Would Be Great by Ellen Johnson Sirleaf. Did she win a Nobel as well? I'm interested in all these Nobel women. Liberia, that have won Nobel Peace Prizes. They've just done extraordinary things. And Sirleaf was the first female president in Africa, I believe. And so far her book is really interesting. I'm enjoying that. And She Would Be King was also really excellent book. It won some awards too, if I recall correctly. Libya, I just read this year, The Return. That is by somebody who was born in Libya but had to emigrate to Egypt quite young because his father had political opinions that diverged from Gaddafi's, which, you know, dangerous prospect. And his father disappeared into the into Gaddafi's prison system. And I say Gaddafi's because it was kind of his personal prison system. Like, it wasn't really as though it served most Libyans really well, or at all. And nobody's heard from him in decades. So I think, to sort of summarize the book, he goes back to Libya once Gaddafi falls to try and find out what happened and to meet his family. Like, there are certain family members that hadn't been even in communication for, I think, about a couple of decades because it was just too dangerous to even attempt it. And a couple of his uncles had been also in that prison system and had been freed when Gaddafi was overthrown. So that was pretty interesting to read about. I don't think anybody knows what happened to his father, and that apparently happened to a fair few people. Like, people would come out of that prison system unrecognizable and with, I don't know, psychological problems, so that their memory was either shot or their ability to communicate was gone. Like, it was a really, as dictatorial prison systems go, it was a brutal one. So thankfully that's not the situation there anymore, but there are people where nobody knows what happened to them. All right, next up, Madagascar, Beyond the Rice Fields. So this is a book that I just read like a week ago as I'm filming this. I might post this in a week or maybe even 2 from now. But yeah, about a week ago. And it was really interesting. It wasn't my favorite book ever. And I think the author lives in Ottawa now. But it was really interesting. It had a lot of cultural, historical, and political knowledge of Madagascar that I just didn't have. And so it was a bit challenging at sometimes because of that. But I'm really glad I read it. I mean, it's a fascinating country that's like part African, part Polynesian. It's an odd one. It's really cool. And then Malaysia. Where's Malaysia? Is that Malaysia? It's not labeled. I might have to look it up. No, it is labeled. I was just looking in slightly the wrong spot. As I said, my knowledge of Southeast Asia and Polynesia, not fantastic. But Tash is, I don't know if he's Canadian now, Canadian Malaysian, something like that. Anyway, he's a really good novelist. I've read a couple of his books, and I think I have another one to read. Highly recommend. Just for, like, if you like modern international literary fiction, excellent choice. Oh, and Young-Si Chu, the Night Tiger, was Malaysian as well. Cool. Next, Mauritania, Guantanamo Diary. Oh yeah, so he's a guy who, where is Mauritania? Is he still in Guantanamo Bay? I think he might be finally out now. I can't remember. Guantanamo Bay is such a disaster. But he'd have been in there for ages for, I don't know if anybody knows what, because you don't need to be charged with anything to be stuck in there for decades. So he hadn't been charged with a crime. And this was his story that I think, did he smuggle it out? I can't, or did he write it after he was released? I can't remember now. He might have given it to his lawyer. Anyway, it was a really interesting insight into what the inside of Guantanamo Bay is, because, you know, you hear about it on the news, and people talk about, you know, the possibility or not of transferring prisoners, yada yada, political stuff, but, you know, people don't often talk about what it's actually like in there, and not good is the answer. Very not good. I mean, it shouldn't really exist at all, in my opinion. It's incredibly undemocratic. I mean, it's about as undemocratic as it gets, really. Oops. Nicked Molly there. Oh well. So that's Mauritania. And Mexico, Like Water for Chocolate. It has been such a long time since I read that book that I don't even think I can remember what it was about, but I remember loving it. I just don't remember what the story was. So anyway, I'll scratch off Mexico and come back again. That's Mexico uncovered. Maybe I should find found a nonfiction book from Mexico. We'll find a history at some point. Okay, Morocco. Tahar Ben Jaloun. Fantastic. Have I read Beyond the Veil? No, I don't think I have. I should. She's another one of those, like Nawal El-Saadawi, who's an iconic feminist in the Middle East. Iconic. Tahar Ben Jaloun is also a very well-known writer in Morocco, and ooh, how political do I want to get? Should I scratch off Western Sahara too? Oh dear. Excel doesn't even give you the option to observe Western Sahara as a separate country. Okay, there we go. Mozambique. Oh, excellent. Miyakuto. Okay, so he's an author I've never read before, but Confession of the Lionist is possibly one of the best books I've read so far this year. It's so good. It's so powerful, but also so, I don't know, it's a bit weird. There's some like odd, I don't know, I guess you could say magical realism sort of things. I don't really know what else to call them, because they're not quite like realism. But it really does explore both the ways in which colonialism and patriarchy have damaged the lives of Mozambican women. Mozambican? Is that what you call them? I don't know. I should really look these things up, I suppose. And it's a beautiful book. It's like haunting. It stayed with me. I've still got these like images every now and again in my head. And I may read it again in French, because I think he writes in French. And, ooh, how did I get around Malawi here? And now I definitely want to read several of his other books. Thankfully, he's been pretty widely translated into English. So that's nice. One of my favorites. Will definitely read more of him. Myanmar, Burma. Here we go. This was an interesting book. I don't know what to think of Aung San Suu Kyi now, because Aung San Suu Kyi? I think it's Aung San Suu Kyi. Could be pronouncing that wrong. Anyway, she also, I think, won the Nobel Prize for Peace. But since then, she's ended up in a position in government, and she's been pretty silent on the Rohingya ethnic cleansing. And I don't know how to tell if that's because the government is restricting her again, because I mean she was under house arrest for like 20 years or something, because she was very pro-democracy in Burma at a time when there was a military dictatorship. But now, yeah, I'm not sure. So it was a good book. I really liked that book, Freedom from Fear. But that was written a long time ago now. So while I'd still recommend it, I'm a bit torn on what to think of her now, because I don't know what's going on there. The Netherlands. I read Corrie ten Boom's The Hiding Place like 25 years ago? I don't know, when I was a kid. 25 years ago, yeah, that sounds about right. A long time ago. But it's about, I can't remember if she's Jewish. I think we read it in a fundamentalist Christian community, so I think Christianity was involved in some way. But it's a Holocaust memoir. And the hiding place being somewhere where they were hiding to try and survive. And I remember liking it, but honestly, I read it such a long time ago. Like, such a long time ago. And also, my views on everything have changed since then, so who knows? I mean, obviously, well, I say obviously, you'd think we could all agree the Holocaust was bad, but apparently we can't now, so that's a problem. But anyway, yeah, that's my book for the Netherlands. And then, what am I at here? New Zealand, Witi Ihimara. I've got another book by him of essays, Black Skin, White Marks, something like that. And I think I've got his memoir, which is Maori Boy. So I think he was the first published Maori author, was he? He might have been. But the whale writer. If you've seen the movie but haven't read the book is really good. Like, really good. Love that one. Nigeria. Ooh, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. So she's made waves lately for some anti-trans things, I think. Or, if not anti-trans, then like trans-exclusive? I don't know. But Americana is a phenomenal book. Where is Nigeria here? And I have read a lot of other authors from Nigeria as well. Because I think as African countries... Whoops! Equatorial Guinea. Nicked them. Sorry, Equatorial Guinea. I think as African authors go, Nigerian authors are some of the easiest to find in English in North America. You can find some Egyptian and some South African, but Nigerians seem to get published in Canada the most often. For some reason. I don't know why that is. Somebody in the publishing industry would have to enlighten me on that one. I mean, I know it's a really big, and in some areas, cosmopolitan country, Nigeria. But yeah, there are a lot of Nigerian, particularly Nigerian women getting published, which is pretty cool. I'm a fan. And it's just such an interesting, completely different from Canada sort of country. All right, next up is Norway, Silence in the Age of Noise. I seem to remember that book being meh. Okay, Celestial Bodies from Oman, that was good. It's hard to, Oman is one of those countries where it's hard to find books in English in Canada, but that one was good. I enjoyed it. Okay, jumping ahead slightly to Pakistan and Palestine, which I've already scratched off. So Pakistan, I read Home Fire. She's a Pakistani-American author. That was a really good novel. And then Benazir Bhutto's memoir, Reconciliation, is fantastic. She lived a heck of a life, and she was assassinated. I'll leave Kashmir there for the time being, and then try and find a Kashmiri author. The only book I've ever read that was set in Kashmir was by Salman Rushdie, but I think he's Indian. So in order to not get in the middle of a heck of a political conflict, I'll try and find an actual Kashmiri author. But yeah, Pakistan is wild. And of course I've read Malala's book a couple of times, and because I read it in French to practice my French, because it was at a sort of more accessible level to me. And yeah, man, some places in the world, like, sure, there are issues in Canada being a woman, no doubt, but other places, it's a nightmare. It's a right nightmare. Why women are still not treated equally is kind of a mystery to me. It's a bit appalling. Also, Palestinian authors, Minor Detail. That's a really good novel. It's a short novel, like I don't know, somewhere between a novel and a novella. It's quite short, but it's really moving. And then Al Kurd's poetry, Rivka, was the other book I put down here for that. I have read A History of Palestine as well, which I also highly recommend. Can I remember? No, I can't. Anyway, it's really interesting though to read, like, especially with the current ethnic cleansing happening, to read about things from the Palestinian points of view, because even in Western media, you don't always get Palestinian points of view. You get the Israeli government points of view, and you get Canadian and American politician points of view, but actual Palestinian citizens, you don't often get their points of view, which is kind of a travesty. So yeah, Peru, Maria Vargas Llosa. I might need to read something else from Peru too, because The Feast of the Goat, I think, was set in Cuba. Is it set in Cuba? Some Caribbean island, I believe, with another dictator problem. Seriously, with the dictators, can we not? Anyway, it was a good one. I enjoyed it. It was another one of those books where having some historical knowledge would be helpful. Like, Wikipedia saved me a couple of times reading that one, because there's just so much about the world that I don't know, as is the case for everybody, I guess. But you know, when you're trying to read, like when I'm reading a Canadian novel, even if it's by like an immigrant author or an Indigenous author, I have a certain amount of cultural information at this point that I can follow it, you know. But sometimes I'm just missing that, and so this was, I think, one of those books where I might have liked it more if I knew more about the politics and history of this region of the world, and I just don't. All right, Poland. Anne Applebaum. Does she count as American or Polish? There is another Polish book I want to read called by Olga Tokarczuk. I cannot say that name. Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead. I think I've got the audiobook for that. It's on my list. Where is Poland here? There we go. Yeah, I will be listening to that at some point. But the Iron Curtain book was really interesting. It's just, you know, if you grew up in a country that was on this side of the Iron Curtain, you've got a vastly different view of history than if you grew up on the other side. And so it was interesting to read a history of more about that. Because, you know, you just really, growing up in Canada, you hear the sort of politically acceptable things. And it just doesn't go into much depth. So yeah, that's Poland. And then Puerto Rico. Shakira Diaz. Ordinary Girls. Where's Puerto Rico? That's a good question. Oh, it's by the Dominican Republic. Okay. Ordinary Girls was, I mean, good. It was a good book. Sometimes I read books by people who are so, like, astonishingly different from me that it's hard to wrap my head around their lives. This was one of those books. Romania. Oh, Elie Wiesel, Night. That's a classic. It's another Holocaust book, but it's, where is Romania? Here, there it is. but it's about as well known as it gets. I've also read Dawn, and is there another one in that series? I think I've read that too, because I have several of his books, and they're all, he's such a good writer, and, you know, writing about such a brutal time, but in a really moving, easy to connect to sort of way. So that's, yeah, fantastic book. Highly recommend. And that's it for part 3, because my phone's at capacity again. I'll have one more after this, but thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.